Just waiting to go live on YouTube. All right, we're live. So welcome everybody to the LSR Fall 2023 Working Writers Panel. My name is Jim Jewell. I use he, him pronouns, and I am the faculty advisor for the Licton Springs Review, which is the literary magazine here at North Seattle College. We feature both written work and visual art from North Seattle College staff, faculty, students, alumni, and we're hoping to maybe expand and pull in some submissions from the rest of the district as well. And I'm really excited to share our two writers today. I do have a little bit of business to do right at the start. And as opposed to reading you a land acknowledgement, I want to share that North Seattle College is in the process right now of working with our partners in Indigenous communities and some tribal leaders to make sure that reimagine how we are approaching our land acknowledgements. So we've put a pause on just reading our formal land acknowledgement for this academic year so we can continue that work. Just as a part of our announcement about this, this I think is the most important part to highlight. It's critical to not have our land acknowledgements become just a token gesture. Land acknowledgements are not meant to be static, scripted statements that every person must recite in exactly the same way. They're expressions of relationships we have with our tribal leaders and Native Indigenous communities. And so I want to take a moment to recognize that we are, in fact, living and working on unceded Indigenous lands. But as opposed to a regular land acknowledgement, and in the spirit of the two playwrights and theater artists we have, I want to share one of the local Indigenous communities that I feel very close to and feel is really important, which is an organization called Red Eagle Soaring Native Youth Theater. Their mission statement is that they exist to empower American Indian and Alaskan Native youth to express themselves with confidence and clarity through traditional and contemporary performing arts. And you can learn more about Red Eagle Soaring at redeaglesoaring.org. It's an organization that absolutely deserves your attention. And I'm looking forward to the continued work that North Seattle College does to refine this process of land acknowledgement at the start of our events. But I think that is plenty from me. So let's get to introducing our two playwrights before we have them share a little bit, or should I say our two writers, before we have them share a little bit of our work. Starting with Maggie Lee. Maggie Lee, she, her, is a Seattle playwright who creates imaginative worlds on stage in genres like science fiction, fantasy, and horror, with productions in Seattle, New York, Seoul, Chicago, and San Francisco. In 2022, she was a contributing book writer for the Fifth Avenue Theater's original musical, And So That Happened. Her other plays include Sheathed, which was a 2019 Gregory Award winner for Outstanding New Play, The Flight Before Christmas, A Hand of Talons, The Tumbleweed Zephyr, The Clockweek Professor, and The Journey of the Bell. She was a Hedgebrook writer in residence, a Jack Straw Artist Support Program residency awardee, and the resident playwright at Macha Theater Works. She's currently a resident playwright at Seattle Public Theater, a board member of Rain City Projects, a contributing writer for the Ugly Radio podcast, and a member of the Dramatist Guild. Maggie, thank you so much for being here with us today. I really appreciate it. It's good to see you.
Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be asked always. So thank you.
And our other writer is José Amador. José Amador, he, him, L, is a local playwright, director, actor who's been actively involved in the Seattle theater scene for over 3 decades. You may have recently seen his work as a director in Two Sisters and a Piano, it's just one example, or as a performer for companies like Cafe Nordo, Theater Schmieder, or 1448, the world's quickest theater festival. While his work as a writer has come in various formats, from essays and critique to sketch comedy and script writing, he is primarily known for his solo performance pieces, A Walk in the Dark, El Hijo Prodigo, and Ague, A Body Horror. Jose, welcome. Thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you. Good to be back in the graces of North Seattle College.
And so you will be the first one sharing a bit of your writing with us. So I'm going to leave the stage to you.
Thank you. This is from the second solo show I wrote called El Hijo Prodigo, which is about a return trip to Puerto Rico, where I was born and raised for 10 years, and the misadventures that I encountered while I was there. I generally just started out talking about the island and my family, and then I encountered my cousin, and that's where we pick up my narrative. Miguel is his name. The family calls him Miguelito or Little Miguel. That's a misnomer if there ever was one. The guy is a little taller and kind of bigger than I am. A lot of men on my mom's side of the family are built like me. As I was constantly told in the United States, my family had a good football body. I'd come to believe that it was just my uncles and I who looked like this. Miguel hasn't always lived on the island. He bounced around the United States for a while. He lived in the Bay Area, Miami, the Upper East Coast. He's been back on the island for about 5 years when I see him, all around the San Juan area, volunteering his time and his car and maintaining my family's house out in Bayamon. I feel very fortunate. He and I don't know each other all that well, so we can't get too deep about my family stuff, my family history. But he speaks English and has a car, and he knows the island pretty well, so I could not have asked for a better guide. Here, I start talking a little bit about the English language, and then I start breaking down some of the norms of how to be in Puerto Rican culture. I give them some words about, some words about members of a family, and then I start talking about how you greet an aged relative or an elder acquaintance. It is a custom in and of itself. There are two important ingredients. First, you have to show that you are fond of them. So to show that, you have to try to make them sound as tiny and as dear and as precious to you as possible. For example, if it has been a while, a straightforward hola abuela will not do. You have to call her little grandma or abuelita. Second, there is the matter of seeking and being blessed. And yes, I am talking about the religious sense of being blessed, like eating healthy and being a vegetarian. Freedom of and from religion is something that you're going to have to forego in order to get the authentic Puerto Rican experience. If you forget, don't worry, there's churches on every other block to remind you. I think my grandmother passed away without ever knowing it, become a Buddhist. So after saying hello, you say bendición, which means, please bless me. It is a sign of respect, to which the answer is, que Dios te bendiga, or may God bless you. You say thank you, they say you're welcome, and then the conversation can continue. Doing this becomes second nature after a while. You don't even think while you're doing this. Anyway, I'll in the process of doing the play, I introduce him to several other words, and I start talking about hanging out with Miguel in and around the San Juan area. And we're driving in his car when Miguel notices something out of the corner of his eye. As we pass the Capitol building in San Juan, we notice that there is a stage being set up. Miguel pulls over and we check out the scene. There is a rumba band that's about to be playing in about 10 minutes, and they're doing so for a local union. There was no admission to the event. So Miguel goes to his car and gets the portable chairs, and we just start hanging out. I'm loving it. It's my first night back on the island, and it's 11 o'clock at night. It is 72 degrees outside in October. There's the Capitol building all lit up. Huge Puerto Rican flags are waving in the breeze. It's about 72 degrees at 11 o'clock at night, and I've been away for about 2 decades at this point, and the music from my childhood is playing, and I cannot deal with all the emotion. It's too much. So I cross the street across from the Capitol building, and there is this little park directly across from it, and it's overlooking the ocean. Oh man, I am screwed. I mean, the music is still going, the Capitol building and the flags are in full sight, and now the ocean. I start to cry. And just as the first teardrops start falling, oh my God, there's fireworks off in the distance, about a mile away. I go up to Miguel and I ask him what the deal is with the fireworks. And he goes, man, I don't know. You're back home is all I can figure. Thank you.
Thank you, Jose. I was fortunate to actually get to see that performed live, I think more than once over the years. Thank you so much. All right, so we're going to do something we haven't done for the working writer panels before. We're going to bring on multiple readers. So we'll let Jose cool his heels in the wings for a little bit, bring Maggie back, and we're going to read a short scene from one of Maggie's plays. Do you want to set up the scene for us at all as we get all the readers on stage?
Sure. So I'm a genre writer, so I like to do a lot of science fiction and horror and fantasy, that kind of nerd stuff. And so this is a horror play. It's sort of rooted in my love for Lovecraftian horror. Yeah. So this is just the first half of a 10-minute play, because 10 minutes is way too long. So hopefully we'll leave you on a good cliffhanger.
Yeah, and I'll just welcome onto our Zoom stage Renee Almatera, who is in advising here at North and is one of our readers. Welcome, Renee. And Chris Dolinsky, who is one of our student editors for the Licton Springs Review that will soon be losing to UW. Our loss will be their gain. And so I think, Maggie, you're going to read the stage directions for us.
I am.
On the role of man.
Yeah. All right, great. Thank you so much, readers. Okay, here we go. This is paper and ink. A study in a slightly shabby apartment, the early 1900s. Two sisters, Elizabeth and Marjorie, enter in the middle of a heated argument. Elizabeth is holding a small package wrapped in brown paper.
I just don't think it's a good idea.
You may as well save your breath, Marjorie.
But Father always said...
I don't give a damn about what Father said.
I know, I'm sorry, but he wouldn't have spoken so strongly if there wasn't some considerable danger.
Danger? He also thought it was dangerous for ladies to dare voice any opinions without consulting their husbands first.
I know, but...
But what? So you'd rather run back to Father with your tail between your legs so he can tell you how to dress, how to speak, how to think? Is that it?
That's not fair, Elizabeth. He doesn't have anything to do with this.
He has everything to do with it.
Chris, I think that's your line.
Did I miss a line?
Yep, that's what it's really all about, isn't it?
Oh. I lost audio. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
I'll start there with he has everything to do with it.
Did your audio go out again, Chris?
Oh my God. Okay, there we go. I'm so sorry. I lost complete volume and I was like, what is happening? I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Let's take it from he has everything again.
He has everything to do with it.
That's what it's really all about, isn't it? Proving him wrong.
He's never been right about a damn thing. It's all because of him that Mother ended up in that awful place, not because of...
Elizabeth slams the package down on the desk. She unwraps it to reveal an old book bound in leather.
The Vicordium Codex. I can't believe you found it. They burned the one that Mother inherited from Grandfather Campbell, didn't they? And it said that the only other copies are locked up in the British Museum and the Heretics Vault in the Vatican.
That's just a rumor to keep the amateurs from dabbling in things beyond their control. Old Albrecht down at the pawn shop has underground feelers all over the globe. I knew he could dig one up for the right price.
Elizabeth, please. There's a reason why they say the Vicordium is dangerous. Brilliant scholars throughout history have gone stark raving mad after reading it, clawed out their eyes, or even killed themselves. And even Mother, with all the precautions she took with her research, even she...
Don't say it.
She wouldn't have ended up in that terrible asylum if she hadn't opened that book.
That's just the story they told us. We don't know what really happened, do we? We only know what Father said to ease his guilt. He wanted her to walk away from her life's work, to be the obedient little wife, and nothing more. Of course, he wants to blame it all on a book rather than face his own responsibility in sending her to that place. He can't tell us what to think anymore. Don't you want to know the truth?
I don't know. That book, it frightens me. I feel like it's watching us.
There's nothing to be scared of. It's just a book, paper and ink, nothing more. And I'd rather hunt down what's lurking in the shadows and face it head on instead of always being skittish of the dark. Wouldn't you?
But I'm not brave like you, Elizabeth. What if something should happen to you, like Mother? I don't know if I could bear it.
Nothing is going to happen to me, silly goose. It's all complete foolishness, just superstition and wayward fancies. There's no way that a book can cause madness, not in any intelligent, rational human being. And I'm going to prove it, and you can help me.
Me? What can I do?
Take my pocket watch. You keep track of time. Check in with me every 15 minutes. So if there's even the slightest hint of any so-called madness, we can stop at once. You think you could do that, Marjorie?
I suppose. You swear to me that you'll stop reading at the first sign of trouble.
Of course. Nothing's going to happen. I promise you.
All right.
Then let's begin. Printing is so faded.
You can't read it?
Just barely. Ugh. The translation is in Middle English. No wonder everyone went mad.
What? What does it say?
The usual heathen gibberish about the end of mankind, unholy creatures lurking the nether regions of our consciousness, a horrible demise of the universe, etc., etc. Do be quiet now, Marjorie, and let me read. You can start the clock, please.
Yes, Elizabeth.
A beat. Elizabeth turns pages as she reads, and Marjorie watches her anxiously. A faint whisper drifts across the stage.
Face.
What did you say?
Me? I didn't say anything. Did you hear something?
No, there's nothing.
He returns to reading.
Your face.
Elizabeth looks suspiciously at Marjorie, who is staring intently at the watch. Elizabeth shrugs it off and goes back to reading, flipping the pages a bit quicker.
Do you feel that on your face?
Time!
Damn it, Marjorie, you needn't shout at the top of your lungs.
I'm sorry. I didn't realize I was holding my breath in like that. How is it?
Fine, just dandy. Just a lot of rambling about unspeakable old deities and dimensional rifts in the fabric of time. Was that really 15 minutes?
Your own watch said so.
Seemed awfully fast.
Did it? Then perhaps we ought to stop.
No, I just lost track of time, I'm sure. Start the clock again. I'll keep going.
All right.
Elizabeth starts to read again, flipping the pages a little quicker. A moment passes, and slowly the man appears from the shadows. He is unearthly, sinister, and strange. Perhaps there's a different quality of light on him, as though he doesn't belong in the same world.
You can feel that on your face, can't you? That little flutter, that tiny feather brush tickle on your skin. Perhaps a breath of wind from the gossamer wings of a passing fly, or a stray cobweb drifting through the air. Do you feel that? On your cheek, just under your right eye.
Elizabeth doesn't turn to look at him, but her hand reaches up, almost absent-mindedly, to her face. She notices just before it touches her cheek and stops, staring at her hand in fascination as though it belonged to a stranger.
So close. Just a flick of your finger to brush that thing away, that little thing, that tiny phantom whisper.
Elizabeth clutches her hand into a fist and sets it down firmly on the desk.
Just brush it away, and you'll be mine, just like your mother.
Time!
Dun, dun, dun.
Gosh, Renee and Chris, thank you so much
Thank you.
for volunteering to be readers for us.
Thank you. So great.
That was a great scene. And let's bring, actually drop me off and then put Jose back in before you put me back in. I just like to have the writers next to each other. Have me as the interviewer off this side. Yeah, now me. We're almost there. Maybe I can spotlight myself on. I'm gonna there we go. Add spotlight. I'm here. All right. Thank you guys so much for sharing some of your work and for being here today. I really appreciate it. I know I sent ahead some questions to think about, so you had some time to think about them ahead of time. We probably won't hit all of them. We're just going to kind of rummage our way through and always start with one of you and then pass it off to the other. And so I think in this case, Maggie, since we left off with your piece, we'll start with you. When did you decide that you were going to be a writer or that you are a writer?
Oh, well, okay. So I've been writing since I was wee, and I think it was because I didn't like math originally. So that was sort of like default. But I wrote fiction originally, and I did plays as an actor, so two separate things. Yeah, I was really into horror when I was younger, and my goal in life was to be Stephen King. So that didn't really work out, but
Really low bar for yourself there.
yeah, and I read all these things about him, and like how he, how he just did his own thing. I think that was what was interesting about Stephen King to me, was that he was trying to struggle through these like writing programs, and they were like literature, and then he was like, I just want to tell a cool story and have some fun, and like that feeling has kept with me throughout the years. So I think I've always known I wanted to be a writer. I don't know, writer with a capital W. Yeah.
We'll have to come back to exactly what the capital W connotes, but I'll give Jose a shot at that question first. When did you decide you were going to be, or that you were a writer?
Decide implies that there was an actual thought process and a plan, and it wasn't really that way. Like Maggie, I wrote a bunch of stuff in school, particularly high school. For English classes, I had a teacher who just let me kind of go crazy as to do whatever I wanted for the assignments, which helped out a lot. He really encouraged that. But in terms of like writing for the stage or writing for myself, that didn't really happen until I had been in Seattle for a couple of years and had grown frustrated at the lack of opportunities for me to perform. So my first solo show kind of came out of a desire to showcase what I could do. In Colorado Springs, I had done a couple of solo shows written by Eric Bogosian, and had done a number of things that way through school. And I kind of wanted to replicate that. I thought that was a good showcase. And that's how that first solo show came about. And from there, other opportunities presented themselves, and I started writing for more people. Started writing sketch. So yeah, it was something like a lot of the things that I am currently doing. The initial push into that field came completely by happenstance, and just deciding like I really enjoy this. I'm going to keep this up, and I haven't stopped since.
Now, you are not the first theater artist that I've heard say that they wrote in order to have things that they could perform, because they felt like they were an outsider in some way in that community.
Performers are egotists at heart, so
and writers.
Yeah.
So I know both of you primarily for your work in theater, but I'm interested to hear like what other kind of writing you do as well. And Jose, I'll have you start off with this one.
Sure. Other writing really has been mostly essays, and I've done some critiques, and that was again another thing that happened by happenstance. I started out at Seattle List. There was a blog in the late aughts, early 2010s that existed. They kind of brought me on board, and there I connected with Omar Willie of the Seattle Star. And I just kind of maintained that practice for about 6-7 years before I started hitting mental blocks, writer's block along the way. But that's been the bulk of my other writing outside of writing for plays and such.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Maggie?
Yeah, I don't really do outside writing outside of plays. You reminded me, I did get my start in sketch comedy also. So I did start out writing a lot of comedy and performing and writing, which is a different thing than just writing. Because yeah, you learn real fast what works and what doesn't when it's your butt on the stage. But yeah, just lately I've just been doing writing. I usually write just straight plays, but I have been actually branching out into book writing for musicals. That's a new thing. So new skill. It's been pretty cool. Yeah. I enjoy music, but I cannot write it so it's great to like be in contact with like with a songwriter and be able to like try to use your brain in a different way and to help with lyrics, which is also a new thing for me. So yeah.
So I don't think I've ever seen you as a performer in the years I've known you. What was it that you felt like what did you learn on stage that you're able to apply to your craft now?
Quicker is better. Yeah. If you want, it's that also it's that 1448 thing where if you want your words to be heard, make less of them so that the actor will be able to remember them. But yeah, I just think that especially in theater, when you're not just writing words, you're writing words to be heard. You're writing words to be like translated through other people, and not just the actor, but through the design and through the director. Like, it just helps to know what that is, to know how that feels, so that when you're writing, you can be conscious of, oh, I know how an actor is going to feel when they do this. And so I want to make it, for me, I want to make it as fun for them as possible, or as easy, I want to help them out, because if I help them out, they'll help me out and everybody wins. So yeah, I think that probably was the most valuable thing, just to know all aspects of what's going to be happening to this piece and to be able to work with that in mind. I think is really helpful.
I think that idea of, when you're writing for theater, of really keeping in mind what the actor will have to do is important. I'm teaching a creative writing class that we wrapped up with a 10-minute play, and that one of the plays I gave some feedback to is a very feminist play, pretty much all the way through. Like its messages are even explicitly feminist, but there is a character near the end whose entire role is to come on stage in a low-cut blouse so another character can refer to her as a slut. And I had to point out, like, this is a great feminist play, but you've just asked an actor to come on stage with their blouse open to deliver one line. And that reality is, if you haven't worked in theater, I think wouldn't occur to you. Then this is kind of an unplanned question, but Jose, how has being an actor and director influenced your writing? Have you been able to translate some of that as well?
I would have to seriously think about that because my writing came for writing for myself. So it was about, like, okay, how is it that I can get my point across the best way possible? What exposition do I need to give in order to make this scene have impact? So it was anything that I brought from the performing world onto that is all about, like, how do I search for the impactful moment? And I think that you'll find whenever you have a playwright who started out as an actor, they write great monologues, they write great dialogue for actors, but the other rudimentary aspects of it are not as focused on. So I try to keep an ear and an eye towards that, like, how to make those things work, so that when the performer actually has to interpret it and deliver it, there is something underneath, what it is that they're saying, instead of just having an intense dramatic moment on stage.
Very cool. So I'm going to get to one of the scripted questions. So I'm going to throw this one to Maggie first. How do your ideas for your writing projects develop, or where do you draw inspiration from?
I guess usually something's bothering me and I kind of have to work it out in my brain. But also, I have this weird thing sometimes where I think of a character and then the character starts talking to me, and then I'm like, okay, I'll figure out what your deal is. And so, like, yeah, so a lot of times that'll start happening, where it's like there's this very specific character, and then I start wondering about them, and then I like build a world around them. But yeah, with the other thing where if it's like something's bothering me and I have to think about it, I don't often approach it head on. I'll often like mask it in something that makes it easier for me to look at it and consider it with a little bit of objectiveness. Yeah. So like, if there's like, I'm having a problem with my parents, I'm not going to write about me and my parents. I'm going to write about like a king and queen, and like having a problem with Hamlet, like that sort of thing. And so I feel like it's a sort of good coping mechanism for me to like work through stuff.
Yeah, and that helps avoid that anxiety that I've had before of writing about my family if they may end up reading it.
Yes. Yeah, I have not been brave in that way yet myself.
Jose, how about you? Like, where do your ideas come from, or how do your ideas develop? Where does your inspiration come from?
Well, I'm gonna split this down the middle because there is writing that I do for others, and then there's writing that I do for myself, and there's a little bit different. Writing I do for others is exactly like Maggie. It's like something is bugging me. How do I talk about this? Like I started for example, I started noticing a trend on particularly right-wing media like Fox News, where they would have women, blonde white women, deliver these news, and they would have these opinions about minorities and what was going on in the world, and and strife, and I that bothered me for a fair amount, and I didn't know quite what to do about it, and then at 1448 I got a prompt that's like, oh well, maybe I can use this to talk about that. And that's how the play kind of developed itself. I created a science fiction kind of camp where alien women have landed, and they start focusing on just Fox News, and they just start spouting this stuff. It's funnier than the description I just gave. And then on the for personal stuff, generally that is inspired by events that I've already lived through, things that I have coped with, things I have thought through. The first solo show, for example, was about like coming to terms with my racial identity, and the journey that I had to take. A part of that was forced to get to embrace my entire self, or at least start to. The second one came from a desire to not only talk about a traumatic event in my family's past, but knowing that at least on the West Coast, there's not a lot of knowledge about Puerto Rico. So the play had several purposes, and one of them was to introduce my culture to people not familiar with it. And sometimes I wonder how that play would have developed if I had lived somewhere with a massive Puerto Rican base, like Philadelphia or Boston or New York. Just how different that show would be, because there's a lot of exposition and introduction and hand-holding and just getting people to a certain place to get them where I needed to be. And then the last solo piece I've written and performed, there's other stuff, but performed as well, was based on a desire to talk about my medical history, but not in a straightforward way. I wanted to come at it from a different angle. And I landed on horror, on body horror. This is why that's in the subtitle. Instead of just sharing, like, I went to the hospital and the doctor gave me this test and they came back with this. I wanted to create a whole world where the patient, the main character, has no idea what on earth is going on, and these things are happening to him that he has no control over, and how he reacts to that. I think that answers your question. I hope it does.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it provides a good segue to something that we talked about offline before the event. Like, because of the autobiographical nature of those one-man shows, I think that you steered directly into this right away. And I'm curious, how do you navigate issues around representation and kind of accountability in some ways to sharing your cultural background or identity, and also wanting to be a writer first? I think one thing I mentioned is I've talked to like writers who make use of mobility devices, and they want to be able to write any kind of art they want, not quote unquote disabled art. So Jose, how have you navigated those questions?
For me, I try to come at those topics in an as obscure a way as possible. The bit about the show about Puerto Rico, yes, it talks about my culture and it talks about those things, but like when I start talking about it, I present it as an educator. I start with a glossary. So it's not me relating my culture. It's me like saying, this is my culture. Here are examples of it. So I make it as artificial as possible. That's how I kind of cope with that dichotomy. I'm going to have to think about this question a little bit more, because I also give myself a license license to kind of fabricate as much as possible. So the first solo show, A Walk in the Dark, yes, I was talking about like coming to terms with my own identity, but I didn't talk a lot about it from my point of view. I talked about it from other characters' point of view, and hope that in the amalgamation of all those characters and storylines that they get to the point that I want them to get to. So yeah, I think that's how I approach it. It's not like, here's my life. It's more like, okay, here's some stuff that you need to understand, but this is the rest of the focus. And somewhere in the middle there, people tend to glean what they need from that.
So is it kind of pairing an acknowledgement with then not moving beyond, but acknowledging, and now I'm going to tell my story?
Yeah.
Like, those are two separate things.
That is essentially it. What ends up happening if I try to not present those things in the feedback process, I just hear is like, okay, well, why did that happen? I don't understand why that happened. And there is a movement that says, like, well, let them figure it out. Let them do their own research. And I think this is certainly a valid argument and a valid approach. As an entertainer, I hate to think of myself in those terms, but as an entertainer, I just want to give them at least a morsel so that they can latch onto that and take everything else that is necessary. So,
yeah. How about you, Maggie? How have you negotiated those issues in your own art?
Yeah, so when I was younger, it was a struggle for me, because if you are a Korean American female person, there was a big push to be like, oh, that's your story, so you should write what you know. And that was the least interesting thing to me, actually, because I was like, I like dragons and ghosts, and like I was not into that, like for myself, like what I was into personally. So then I had this struggle where I was like, well, I guess I should be doing my family and my culture, and I just didn't want to. And at some point I came to like terms with myself, and I said, if the writer writes what you know, this is what I know. I know nerd stuff, and I like nerd stuff, and so that's me. That is my culture. Like, that's part of me. And yes, my upbringing affects that for sure, like who I am. So just accepting that and like embracing that as like, who is your true self? Like, what is your true voice? That was a really difficult thing for me to do, though, because for a long time I was like, well, I guess my true voice is that I should be talking about women and stuff, or I don't know, whatever it is that you were supposed to be talking about if you were like a serious artist. And I was like, no, this is what I want to talk about. But also I do want to say that things from my culture do pop up within my plays in different forms. So like a good example I would say is that like I have a lot of struggle with identity, with your identity as being a part of a certain group, and like how much does that define you, and like how much is you just as an individual. And so like specifically, like if I'm in a Korean family, like does my family tell me who I should be? And so the way that I sort of dealt with that, I wrote a steampunk sci-fi adventure about there are these clones, and like the clones are of the same royal family, and then they send these clones out to like different dimensions, and so they grow up and they have their own lives, but then really they're cloned from the same one person. And so like at some point they bring them back, and are they honored, bound to like be what this family has, like what their blood has told them to be, or can they be themselves, and can they be what their own lives have been, that they've made for themselves? And so that's sort of my way of like tackling how I feel about like my own struggle, but not in a, like Jose is saying, like not in a like, here's my story, but like if you read it and you're like, oh, this is what Maggie always talks about. She's like talking about struggle, but it's just in a different format. And it's also, I feel like it opens it up to the audience in a way that invites them to like think about these ideas in a more like universal sense. So, yeah.
sets up a big another question. This is a question that I constantly focus on with all of my writing students, whether it's comp rhetoric in an English 101 class or a creative writing class, which is, how do you balance saying what you want to say with servicing any audience's needs and desires? Like, how do you balance those two interests in your head? And we'll start with Maggie for this one.
So Jose was talking about being an entertainer, and I think that we're entertainers. I know it's not a popular thing to say, but like, I like it when people go to my shows and have fun. Like, I want them to have a good time. And by that, I don't mean it should be a comedy and it should be like fluffy or whatever. Like, I want them to have a good time. So like, I love crying, at plays, and I love like feeling big emotions, and I love getting swept up and stuff. And I want to give that to my audience. And so I definitely write knowing that this is going to be experienced by, not even seen, but just like experienced by an audience. And how can I help make that a successful like experience for them? Yeah. So I do for sure.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
How about you? How do you balance your voice and the audience's needs, desires?
Oh man, I don't know how popular this answer is going to be.
I already said the like unpopular things. So go ahead.
the thing is, okay, so you talk about an entertainer, and you mentioned Stephen King earlier, and it's something that he talks about a certain amount as well. That he writes the stuff, but I don't know. There's Stephen King on one hand, and then there's like artists like Spalding Gray or Laurie Anderson or the other extreme in terms of like pure art versus pure entertainer. There's somewhere in between, and I find that the way I cope with it is to like with talking about my culture. It's just a morsel. It's just a bit over in the corner. The audience expectations of what they want and what they're looking for. Yes, that is a consideration, but I put greater weight on the things that I want to say. So yes, I don't tend to think of the audience all that much until I get the feedback process, and then I start like weighing notes about like, okay, well, what's important and what's not. Do they need to know this, or do they need to know? I find that keeping the audience in mind tends to water down what it is that you want to say, and I think that's more important. I think the statement is more important than having the entertaining thing. It's probably why I'm not produced on Broadway.
Well, actually, that perfectly segues into the question I was going to follow this up with, which is, what does literary art or artistic success look like to you? How do you define that for yourself, Jose?
People coming. So like, as much as I say your audience is not that important, it's still a consideration. I still want people to come, and I think that is, as long as people are experiencing it, that is success. I may grouse about it later on. I may complain a whole lot about like, oh, not enough people, but really, when I am approached by somebody who says, I saw that show and I really loved it, and we get into a discussion about what the show was talking about, that is a lot more satisfying than the check I get at the end of the production.
Yeah, that's engagement. That your play engaged them, and then you get to engage with that theater goer afterward. That's fantastic.
And let me say that it's not that easy a mindset to. We as Americans in Western culture are taught like it's the money that counts. Everything else can go do whatever it wants to do, for cleaner language. Adopting the engagement is more important than money is something that you need to actively work on, unless you're lucky enough to have that ingrained in you early.
So so as I move the question over to Maggie, I so want her answer to just be money.
I tell you, my parents didn't think anything of my work in theater. They're like, oh, you're gonna do your little fun play thing with your friend, until I got paid, and then they were like, oh, you're getting paid. Okay, well, I guess this is actual work. And like, I've been working this whole time. It's a lot of work. Yeah. Which, they're very practical. So yes, money is important. But I feel like I've gotten to this point where I'm a little older. And I think when I was younger, I had this like, oh, I'm going to go get an MFA and I'm going to, go to Broadway. And I don't, even people on Broadway are not making tons of money. Anyway. So at this point where I am in my career, living in Seattle as a playwright, I always want to I feel like the play is a success and I am a success if the experience was good for everybody involved. So like, if I had a good time and I enjoyed what I did and the actors had a good time and they enjoyed what they did and the audience had a good time and they enjoyed what they did. And like, I feel like that for me feels like success. Mm-hmm. Because what else are we doing? Like, like why do we even show up for this if we're not gonna like have a good experience together? And so, yeah, if I can help be a part of this process that creates something that is a once in a lifetime experience for everybody, I feel like that for me, I feel successful.
I feel like that answer definitely is influenced by the fact that, and all of us have been involved in 1448, the world's quickest theater festival over the years, where the entire life cycle of a play starts on one night with getting handed a theme and a number of actors, and then takes place over the next 24 hours. And a lot of folks will end up defining success in that arena as long as the actors and the directors and the audience had a good time, I, as a writer, feel like I've done my job. And I love that you guys had that. Now that's just the ethos that you're working with.
Well, and also, like that I like it. You know what I mean? Like, because that's the thing. Sometimes you see your own play, you're like, oh my God, what happened? Right. And like, I want to like it too. I want to do a good job for me. And so like, I loved going to see theater. And so I want to love this piece. I think that's the goal.
Well, you both just keep setting up perfectly. When I glance over and think, what question am I going to ask next? And I decide, and then you guys set it up perfect, which was, do you have a favorite thing that you've written? And we'll start with Maggie.
Oh, no.
That's a great first answer. Oh, no, I don't want to.
Oh, no. Which of my babies?
You're asking us to pick a favorite baby.
I know. That's just mean.
I only have one child, so I just think of it in those terms. And I wouldn't say the favorite, like a favorite, and why. That way it doesn't have to be the one.
Okay.
A favorite. Well, okay. Well, So I have a play coming up at Seattle Public Theater. It's going to be produced in February. It's called Once More, Just for You. And after I had just finished talking about how I don't talk about my parents, this is my first play that's sort of about my parents and has Korean characters, which I have never done.
Wow.
So I'm really proud of being brave in that way a little bit. And so I'm a little bit scared, and because by now I'm a little bit jaded sometimes, but I'm like, oh, okay, we'll just do a play. But this is like totally new territory for me. So it's going to hold a special place in my heart for me being brave and being like, I'm going to branch out to this new thing and see what happens.
Are you going to be working through the production process, or is it more of a hands-off, like hand off the script?
No, it's still in progress right now. We had a reading back in April, and then we got picked for the season, and so I'm sort of working on it. And so I've been, even as we speak, like I've been looking at the poster and like trying to work on the marketing, and then we cast it, but like there's some things in the script I still want to work on. And being a part of the new play process with a company that welcomes the playwright is so great. I have to just say, Seattle Public Theater, yay. And a handoff is, I very rarely just do a handoff, I have to say. I think if I were cooler and more successful, I would be okay with that. But I'm always like, I want to see what's happening. I want to get in there. I want to make change. I want to make it easier for you. So as the process is happening, what can we do to like help move this along in a way that might be less stressful for everybody? Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's
Well,
a
it's
long.
got to be, and sometimes there has to be at least some moments where it's refreshing for the director to be able to turn to the writer and say, we need to fix this moment. Can you help us
Yeah.
fix that beat?
Yeah. And sometimes I'll say no. And sometimes I'll be like, yeah, sure, let's reword. You know, you don't know until it's on its feet. That's what's great about plays. It's like, yeah, it's not done. It's never done, I don't think.
Well, and like the audience has to be there and reacting to it as well before it can possibly be anywhere close to done.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Jose, how about you? Any a favorite thing that you've written and why?
Really quickly, congratulations, Maggie, on getting the next thing produced. And let me echo as well, though, always wanted to have a finger in the process. I don't know that I could ever leave a play alone. In terms of favorite, I mean, okay. I like all three of the solo shows. That's a given. Let's focus on the comedic stuff that I've written, and then there, well, maybe not. There's a little sketch that I wrote about white guilt that I still.
That's what I met Jose is at the show that featured that sketch.
That's always a fun thing. So that's a favorite there. There's a couple of 1448 things that I have written. The one that I mentioned earlier about the sci-fi Fox news reporter farm, that was a lot of fun to write and to see up on its feet. And then there's one that was not produced that I just did on my own, in which a group of scientists are submerged underwater, and through haikus from the point of view of jellyfish, and then the crew talking amongst each other, you kind of sense that an apocalypse has happened, and this is the last of humanity in the ship. It's not a happy piece, but I still think about that piece and wanting to see it done.
That's awesome. Yeah. All right, one last question before we open it up. I know at least one of the members of the audience has a question for you. What's the best money you've ever spent as a writer, Jose?
I guess that trip to Puerto Rico was worth it.
Yeah. Did you write it off because you like it was a trip that kind of fed into business, right?
Yeah, I'm not that savvy. It certainly was not that savvy at the time. Man, in terms of money spent, it's like, you know, this microphone, this laptop, this other computer over here. Those are the worthy investments. The thing that helped me and enabled me to do the writing, I guess, would be the worthy investment. And the rest is just experiencing. So whatever money I spent on that, you know, going to Puerto Rico, being a patient in a hospital, all of that stuff, you know, just kind of feeds back into the mill.
How about you, Maggie? The best money you ever spent as a writer?
I think probably moving to Seattle, because I grew up in the Bay Area in California, in Silicon Valley, and in the suburbs. And I did theater tech stuff because I was also into lighting design. And so my theater stuff was mostly just doing that. But when I moved to Seattle, I felt like I was in my 20s, and like there was just sort of a freedom to try stuff, and like giving myself enough distance from my old life, but not too much distance, you know, like, so I had safety, but I also like felt like I could be a little bit brave. I think that was probably the best thing, is to like give myself space to like figure out what I was doing, because I didn't really know at that point. Yeah, I still wanted to write novels at that point. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that we all kind of landed in Seattle in probably within the same decade of one another. When there was a time where it was a little bit easier to get by here than it might be these days.
Yeah, I got here in 2001, and I had a studio that was like $500, and I was like, "Oh, that's a lot of money, $500 for a studio." I don't know. It was like, "Oh my gosh, what's wrong with you?"
Yeah, that ease of living also translated to a lot more experimentation in content. And it's something that I still miss every once in a while.
Yeah.
By which I mean a lot.
Mhm.
Very often. I miss that a lot.
Yeah, and theater and probably in other art forms too, where it's just like, hey, let's just get together and try this thing. Wow, that was crazy, you know. But you can't do that now because it's like, okay, well, we got to rent this and so much, and just it's such a barrier. I think that's true.
We need more artist jam spaces.
Yeah.
So I think one of our editors, Chris, you had a question for Jose and Maggie. Do you want to ask that now? And I'm going to go ahead and set this so the rest of our audience can ask questions if they want to as well.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask about whether or not there are special considerations when you're writing stage direction, especially if you know that the work is perhaps going to be translated or done for a different sort of audience than maybe you've originally written it. Like, is there something different that you would do for stage direction versus, you know, just a regular, like the irregular intended audience versus like a separate maybe audience outside of your normal fan base, or if it's going into a different language?
Yeah, I can jump in on that. So I also, along with being an actor, I was also have a technical background, and so I worked on design for theater. So I know how stressful it can be when people are like too specific about stuff. But I feel like that also helps with my writing, and that I can write plays, and I'm trying to think about how the line designer is going to do it. And I'm not going to tell them how to do it, but I'm like, well, this is how I would do it. And so like, it can be done. But also what's nice is that you can just leave it open-ended and let them figure it out. Like in that play, the scene we just read, the man appears out of the shadows. How is that going to happen? We don't know. Like, does he come out of the floor? Does he, does he come from the wings? Is there smoke and then he like appears? We don't know. But when you just say the man appears from the shadows, that's when the director gets to do their thing and like put their spin on it. And you have to just be open to like how that's going to happen. And it might not be how you envisioned it. It might be worse. It might be better. We don't know. But like, you just are like, this is what happens. He comes out of the shadows. And then however they get to translate that, I think is part of the fun of it, really.
Yeah, I've told my creative writing students when they do their 10-minute play that it's a leap of faith. You don't know exactly what it's going to look like, and you have to kind of embrace that
Mm-hmm.
faith in the collaborative process. How about you, Jose?
Yes, but in terms of my writing, it helps to have experience in the field that you're writing in. So as a playwright, it helps to have that experience of being in a play and knowing what goes into it. But it is a leap of faith. So in that scenario, just knowing the limitations of what a stage can do, I kind of write along those lines. It's something that I've noticed in more modern scripts is a lot of it is written as though it were a movie. They talk about transitions, they talk about flashing back, they talk about like, suddenly it goes from being inside of a house to being in a car to like you're in the middle of an auditorium. Unless you have a massive budget. And actually, I can't think of a budget so big that allows you to go to those three places in a row. So I would encourage people who are starting to get into writing for the stage or whatever the medium, it's not even for the stage, to at least be a little familiar of what the technical side of what you're writing is going to entail. Just because that gives you a little bit of a parameter and lets your expectations be a little bit more realistic than expecting to go from outer space to deep in the cave, which actually that would be pretty easy. But you know what I mean? just along those lines. Otherwise, just write what you want and trust what the people who are going to be handling this are going to do what they can to represent that for you, and accept what they give you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, that's good. Sorry. I just wanted to say too that like, there's a magic thing that I just want to tell people about that they don't like. When an audience comes in, there's a weird like agreement that whatever is on stage is what's happening. And it's not realistic. A lot of times it's not like a movie where it's like, I'm in a spaceship, so I need all my little panels, I need a door and I need, a chair. If you're sitting on stage, you're sitting on a block and you say, I'm in a spaceship, you're in a spaceship, and everybody agrees that you're in a spaceship, as long as you can pull it off. As long as you believe it, the audience will believe it. And so there's a lot of that also. That is, I think, a really interesting thing that a lot of people talk about it, as far as the medium of like theater, is like, we're all agreeing that this is happening, right? And it's not. It's totally not realistic.
Well, that's why I think something that's funny in a play is always funnier, because it's in the play, you're sitting in the room where it happens, and the people around you are experiencing it as well. Mm-hmm. But that was like when I was still working in marketing for Seattle Children's Theater, that was a really difficult thing to articulate in a way that people could understand what you meant. But you're right, when we come in, we're all in this together. Cue high school.
And we're all gonna sit facing the same direction, and we're all gonna like watch this thing. So it's weird. It's like a weird thing.
Yeah. Any other questions from our audience? We got time for one more. We've gone a little bit over time, but if someone does have a question that they'd like to ask Maggie and Jose, I'll give it a short pause to see. So Maggie and Jose, thank you so much for being part of this Discorder. I love the Working Writers panels. We've actually had a chance to talk to some other folks we know, like Scott O'More was part of one in the past, and we're going to keep on doing these. So maybe we'll invite you back a little bit down the road. But thank you so much for being part of it today. And thank you for everyone that joined either in Zoom or on YouTube, or who is watching this later on via the YouTube archive. Really appreciate you being here, and would love to see your work in the Licton Springs Review at LictonSpringsReview.com. All right. Have a good one, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.